Welcome back to 28storms.com. This is a special Mardi Gras severe weather update on this Tuesday, March 8th, 2011. We have ongoing severe weather across the southern plains and lower Mississippi Valley. Here's the main troublemaker in this pattern. It's this negatively tilted shortwave trough coming out of the Colorado, New Mexico area continuing eastward across the plains. Here is the latest high-resolution visible imagery, and as you can see, there's been some slight pockets of sunshine trying to get through the cloud cover over southwest Louisiana, and if anything, that's only going to destabilize the atmosphere even further. Over toward the northwest, we have the dry line becoming more prominent, and we're beginning to have thunderstorm and even severe thunderstorm initiation out directly over that dry line feature. Here are the latest surface observations, and you can see that dry line feature fairly well. As you can see, the thunderstorms are beginning to break out right over it, but just to the west we have temperatures now flirting with 80 degrees as they're expected to warm a little bit with the dry front passage. And over toward the east we still have temperatures in the upper 60s to low 70s. But more importantly, look at the surface dew points. We have dew points in the low to mid 60s out ahead of the line, and dew points in the low to mid 40s just to the west. Now out in the warm sector we have temperatures in the low to mid 70s, but also we have dew points flirting with 70 degrees, which is really high for this time of the year. We're only talking about early March, and that's the norm over much of central and southwest Louisiana. Further toward the north, that warm front is trying to make it further north, but convection is really trying to limit the amount of extent that this warm front can make it, as cloud cover is really putting a damper on the daylight or daytime heating. Now, this is a good example of what daytime heating can do. This was the 12Z 6 a.m. sounding out of Lake Charles, Louisiana, and if you look really closely, you'll notice that there's a 700 millibar inversion in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and basically what that is it means that the mid-level temperatures are warmer than the surface temperatures, which really prevents you from getting much lift, which will prevent the atmosphere from destabilizing, and we won't really have much in the way of thunderstorm development. But as that sunshine began to peak out around the afternoon hours with those pockets of sunshine trying to break through, by 18Z we've seen that erosion of the inversion has really occurred here, and we don't really have much of an inversion left at all. But at the same time, we still have a lot of veering with the winds with height. We still have south-southeast winds near the surface, but then they veer more toward the west-southwest between 700 and 300 millibars, and we have an elevated mixed layer at around 700. It's between 500 and 700, which basically means that you have a lot of dry air aloft, which is a pretty good recipe for severe weather over the southern part of the United States. Here's a quick look at the latest HRRR model simulation. This is starting off at 1 p.m. and as we go into time, let's see, this is 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m. So what you can see over the next few hours, we're going to have a lot of convective initiation continue in the warm sector just south of that warm front, and we also have to keep an eye on northeast Texas into southeast Oklahoma for any type of supercell activity along the dry line. This is now 6 p.m. and we have a multi-cluster area, and this is some really heavy rain. We could see a couple inches per hour if that model were to verify. 7 p.m. and 8 p.m., 9 p.m., and I tell you what, these cells, if this model were to verify, you're not only going to have the risk for tornadoes, but you're also going to have the risk for damaging winds. So bottom line is the tornado threat will definitely persist over southeast and south central Louisiana over the afternoon and evening hours, and then after sunset that's going to begin to expand on into south central and southwest Mississippi. Let's see, this is now 10 p.m., 11, midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. So that threat will continue to persist, and by the early morning hours it may try to become more of a wind threat instead of a tornado threat, but nevertheless we'll have to keep a close watch on all this. Now, for anyone living in southeast Texas that may be interested in why they're not getting much of the severe weather, it's because we still have a bit of a temperature inversion in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and this map shows it fairly well. This is the latest convective inhibition map from the RUC model, and as you can see, the temperature inversion is expected to remain over southeast Texas, And the main reason behind that is because we're still getting southwest winds in the mid-levels coming off of the Mexican plateau. And that dry air is a bit warmer than the more buoyant, warm, moist air near the surface that's coming out of the Gulf of Mexico. So we're expecting that inversion to remain in place with little in the way of any precipitation for southeast Texas. Here's the latest surface to 500 millibar bulk shear analysis from the RUC, and as you can see, we have shear values in excess of 50 knots over coastal Louisiana, and also fairly high values along the dry line. And this is no surprise, but the helicity values are through the roof. Now, the tornado threat over Louisiana continues to be our main concern, and the next parameter is going to be the significant tornado probability parameter, and or ingredients parameter, I should say. And this is looking at 3 p.m., which is right about the time of this video. And unfortunately, by around sunset or 6 p.m., the values really begin to max out near Alexandria, Louisiana, with values near 50, as you can see here. And as we begin to go into the overnight hours at 9 p.m., they're still very high over central Louisiana, spreading on toward New Orleans as well. So New Orleans will most likely have to be dealing with the tornado watch and the threat of tornadoes during Mardi Gras festivities late tonight. So please tell anyone that you may know down there to keep a close eye on the weather. And this threat will continue to march on off toward the east in the overnight hours across southern Mississippi and southeast Louisiana. So to sum things up, I would not at all be surprised if there were 1 or 2 tornadoes across portions of east central Texas into northwest Louisiana. We don't want to rule out the possibility of isolated tornadoes east of the Dallas metro, even into southeast Oklahoma, as this dry line continues to advance toward the east. And over in the volatile warm sector, we definitely cannot rule out a few tornadoes, some possibly strong. We've already had a couple tornado warnings near the Baton Rouge metro area. This area has become more of a multi-clustered mess, which means that it has a slightly less chance of producing a tornado, but nevertheless this area should be watched closely as it marches into southern Mississippi. And I think the greatest threat could begin to occur later this afternoon into the early evening hours over central Louisiana, where the highest CAPE values and surface dew points, moisture, and shear are located. So this whole general area is going to have to keep a close watch on the weather during the overnight hours tonight. So thank you again for checking out 28storms.com. We'll do our best to update our viewers on this developing weather situation.